Hello and welcome back, everybody. This is Dr. Carlisle Rogers, and we are talking about memory today. And of course, this is Psychology 100, Introduction to Psychology. So, memory. Memory influences virtually every aspect of our daily lives. It allows us to remember our names, recognize friends and family, to learn new information, and draw upon past experiences to solve problems. Now, although memory often feels effortless, psychologists have actually discovered that it's actually a complex process involving things like encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. So let's kick it off with the concept of encoding. Now, encoding is the process of transforming information into a form that can be stored in our memory. Think of encoding as entering information into the brain's filing system. Every day we are exposed to enormous amounts of information, but only a portion of that information is encoded well enough to be remembered later. So the way information is encoded plays a really major role in determining whether we will remember it in the future. So one of the earliest stages of memory is called iconic memory. Now, iconic memory is a form of sensory memory that's associated with vision. Now, it briefly holds visual information for only a fraction of a second after a stimulus disappears. For example, when you wave a sparkler at night and briefly see a trail of light, iconic memory helps create that experience. Now, although iconic memory is extremely short-lived, it does provide the brain with enough time to process visual information before it actually disappears. Now, not all information that reaches our senses becomes a long-term memory. Sometimes information is lost because of encoding failure. Now, encoding failure occurs when information is never processed deeply enough to enter memory, actually in the very first place. A classic example involves the symbols above number keys on a computer keyboard. You think about it, most people see them every day, yet many cannot accurately recall them because they may never be meaningfully encoded into the brain. Now, once information is encoded, it must be stored. However, stored memories are not permanent. One explanation for actually forgetting is called storage decay. Now, storage decay refers to the gradual fading of memory traces over time. Now, if information is not used or reviewed or reinforced, the memory may weaken and eventually become inaccessible. Another explanation for forgetting involves interference. Now, interference occurs when memories compete with one another. So imagine learning a new password and then accidentally typing an old password. Now, in this case, the older memory interferes with the newer one. Interference demonstrates that forgetting is not always caused by memories disappearing, but sometimes memories are simply competing for retrieval. So this brings us to the concept of retrieval failure. Retrieval failure occurs when information has been stored in memory, but it can't be accessed at a particular moment. For instance, if you think about it, have you ever thought or known a person's name, but you weren't able to recall it until hours later? That experience illustrates retrieval failure. So the information was stored, but the proper retrieval cues were temporarily unavailable. Now, psychologists also distinguish between recall and recognition. Now, recall involves retrieving information with few or no cues. SE exams are a really good example because students must generate information from memory. Recognition, on the other hand, involves identifying previously learned information when it is presented. Multiple choice exams rely heavily on recognition. Most people find recognition easier than recall because the information is already present and simply needs to be identified. Now, another interesting phenomena is source amnesia. Now, source amnesia occurs when people remember information, but forget where it came from. For example, you might remember a fact, but be unable to recall whether you learned it from a textbook, a friend, a website, or even a social media post. This can create problems because people sometimes become confident in information without remembering whether the original source was reliable. Now, something that's closely related is the misinformation effect, which occurs when misleading information alters a person's memory of an event. Now, research has shown that memories are not exact recordings of reality. Instead, they are reconstructed. As a result, suggestions, leading questions, and even new information can sometimes change what people believe they remember. Now, this finding, of course, has become, is very important, has implications for things like eyewitness testimony and criminal investigations. Another topic that often generates discussion is repression. Repression refers to the idea that the mind may unconsciously push distressing memories out of awareness as a defense mechanism. Now, while psychologists continue to debate, different aspects of repression, the concept highlights the possibility that emotional factors may influence memory and retrieval. Now, certain forms of memory loss help us better understand how memory actually functions. Anterograde amnesia refers to an inability to form new long-term memories after an injury or illness. Now, individuals with anterograde amnesia may remember events from the past, but then struggle to create lasting memories of new experiences. Now, in contrast, retrograde amnesia involves difficulty remembering events that occurred before an injury or trauma. So, a person with retrograde amnesia may actually have trouble recalling parts of their past while still being able to form new memories going forward. So finally, let's talk about implicit memory. Implicit memory involves memories that influence our behavior without conscious awareness. For example, once you learn how to ride a bicycle, you typically don't have to consciously think through every movement. The memory is expressed through performance rather than conscious recollection. Implicit memory helps explain how skills and habits can remain intact even when other forms of memory are impaired. So, as we conclude, remember that memory is not a simple recording device. It is an active process involving encoding, storage, retrieval, and reconstruction. Concepts such as recall, recognition, interference, storage decay, source amnesia, the misinformation effect, retrieval failure, and different forms of amnesia help us understand why memory is both powerful and imperfect. So by studying memory, psychologists gain valuable insight into how we learn, how we adapt, and how we actually make sense of our experiences. Now, by understanding these processes, by doing that, it not only helps us become better learners, but also helps us appreciate the remarkable complexity of the human mind. Hopefully that helps you with memory, and stay tuned for classical conditioning.